All right, John, we're live. Thank you for coming back to the channel here.
Glad to be here.
All right, so I just want to make an announcement to the ones that are watching. We're live streaming on YouTube. We're going to be taking questions on X Spaces and in the chat. So we're doing a simulcast on X Spaces. So for the ones that are watching, please make sure you type in your question or just ask for the mic on X Spaces and we will answer. And if we missed some questions from prior episodes, please re-ask and we will get to them. Also, in the description of this video and all the videos I have done with John, there's a link to his website. So please click that link, go to the website, take a look at the periodicals that he publishes, sign up for them. He also does readings. We'll describe what all that is and how to sign up for it. But please click that link. I'll remind you throughout this broadcast to click the link multiple times and help John out. And we can continue on these episodes talking about current events and a unique perspective. I think that these shows that we do give a little bit of a different perspective of what's going on in the world. So, John, take it away.
Well, there's like I was saying, I feel a little bad that we've gotten into some really good long back and forth, uh, Paul and I. But in a way, I'm wondering if some of you were out there wanting to ask a question, and so I kind of thought today, or this evening, or wherever you are in any time zone around the world, that maybe we could do something where if you've had a question that you wanted to ask and didn't get a chance to ask, this show. I'd really like to respond to you, and the show will be yours to shape with your questions. So as soon as I'll talk a little bit and talk about some things that are going on of late right now to kind of get this thing going. But as soon as we get a question, Paul, I think, will put up his finger, the index finger. I know some people would like him to put another finger, but so then we'll begin. So, yes, well, it is the things that I've been talking about, and my readers know about this, but I've also been talking about this a lot on the last few shows over the last couple weeks, every other Sunday, about this important thing that I wrote about in and published in August, where I looked at the astrology that would happen when Mars started transiting Scorpio. It's a tough place for Mars, even though Mars is the lower ruler of Scorpio. It's very stubborn warrior, um, shoot first and ask questions later kind of position. And I saw that this thing would begin on the 23rd of September. Now, Rosh Hashanah, the shofar, the horn that blows in the new year, I think if I'm right there, is was blown on the 22nd. And just the day after that happened, uh, we had Mars move into Scorpio. Now, hopefully, it'll be some good news for this next Jewish year. But as I said, and I think the last show, I said that there's so much evil millennium momentum, that is such evil momentum in what has been going on in this Holocaust and the Palestinian situation, and the fact that there's open talk, war fever in Europe, and not with the people. They're the last people who want this to happen, but they're leaders who are completely deaf to what the people want. And this sign of decline of the West is really getting intense right now, and it looks like, I mean, we could actually be seeing in the next less than 2 weeks when this thing gets even more intense, especially with the chart of Israel, the birth chart of Israel from 1948. Uh, a real reckoning if Netanyahu does and the United States makes their surprise attack on Iran, which is no surprise at all. Um, it's going to be it, it could be that Israel doesn't is not really prepared for this. There's still a lot of devastation from the last June, Friday the 13th, when they launched a surprise attack on Iran. Iran is united. It is rather than break the country up, the attack has united Iran with a national spirit that rivals what the Soviet Union's people had, where a lot of people hated Stalin, but when they were invaded by Hitler, they gathered around him and around their brethren and sistren, and they fought the most titanic campaign in warfare history, and nearly were destroyed, but turned around and completely destroyed Nazi Germany. And now the karmic echo is a a very, very sick joke of a karmic echo, that the very people that were victims of the last Holocaust are the prime contributors to the current Holocaust, which is also a Holocaust against Semitic peoples, the Palestinians, their cousin brothers and sisters. Arabs are cousin brothers and sisters of the Hebrews and the Jews, the modern name. Uh, and so I think in our last show, I talked about how we, I said to Paul, I said, when I look at this, dare I say it, they're the only option that a weakened Israel who's trying to attack the some, so, trying to attack Iran now is going to be counterattacked in a very severe way. Um, and if you think Friday the 12th-day so-called war, it's actually a 12-day campaign in the Israeli against Iran missile war that started on April Fool's Day on 2024. And this is a little war within the war. Well, if it happens again, um, the Iranians will devastate Israel to the point of where it cannot sustain itself. That is very likely. And what then do they have left to throw at Iran? What will they possibly throw at Iran at the beginning? Because they can't surprise Iran. They're ready. It's just like if the Japanese postponed their Pearl Harbor attack, or they did it and they didn't quite do it right. Oh, we're going to come back again. Kind of like what Midway was supposed to be in 1942 in May or June, early June. And of course, the Americans were waiting for them. And they destroyed they sank 4 carriers in one day. They broke the back of the Japanese aerial wing of its navy, which was a turning point. Actually, it took another 3 years of fighting to really end it, but that was the turning point. That was the end of the great offensive gamble of Imperial Japan's navy. And so I see a similarity here that, but with a difference. Um, the difference is that war, the option that I can only conceive that they would do is not do what they did before in a surprise attack, because it can't be a surprise attack. And also what I'm seeing with so many gravity bombs being flown in to the Israeli air forces, which means that they're going to have to fly over Iranian airspace this time. This is not something you can do fire off in over Iraq airspace. The kind of bombs that they are putting together are bombs where they're going to have to fly into the airspace that now is filled with S-400 Russian batteries, the best anti-air, anti-missile batteries in the world, 20 years ahead of anything the West has. Also, China is putting in a lot of things to help them because Iran is part of the new I in BRICS, in the BRICS organization, is not India is taking a little break. It's Iran. It is Brazil, uh, Russia, Iran, uh, China, and the South is for South Africa. And so I'm very concerned that Netanyahu, given that he's really running out of options more than before, he's really stretched it to the end. I'm concerned that he will start the thing that would be a surprise would be a nuclear attack on Iran. You know, when you've outraged all levels of civil behavior like the Zionist regime has, uh, you can even excuse that. And I'm really thinking that we may be seeing something we haven't seen since 1945. Somebody using atomic weapons on somebody else in not somebody who's already on the floor kicked beaten up and we just throw a few bombs at them just to kick them in the side, but somebody who can fight back. And the other thing that I reiterate from what I said in my last show is that there is even a likely possibility that Iran, being attacked so much by Israel and having their leaders nearly decapitated, may very well have already got some bombs. Because I was saying in other shows how they're at that final threshold where, you know, if you look at building atomic weapons as a threshold of like building a pyramid, your first big effort is this huge platform, which doesn't get you very high to the top. But with each step, if it's a step pyramid, each of those platforms gets smaller and smaller and less difficult to do until, as MIT's Ted Postal says, one of my best sources for ballistic and weaponry expert, he says the last step is the easiest step. It's literally like putting a capstone on it, which is just this big. You go beak like that, and then you've got them. So it's possible that Iran may respond with 10 nuclear weapons in response. So we could be seeing the first, what I used to call way back in 1990 in my book, The Millennium Book of Prophecy, a nuclear bush war. In it's a small scale. So I really hope I'm wrong about this, but I just can feel it. The temptation is there. What else can Netanyahu do? And how often has he gotten away with outraging the world? I mean, just now, the whole flotilla, apparently, they were putting them in torture. They were having the people and they just came on the boats. It was a really bad look. Here, the Israeli Navy with all these people armed to the teeth coming on these boats with a bunch of middle-aged people going, "Don't shoot, don't shoot," and one Greta Thunberg, "Don't shoot," and they denied them food and water for 2 days, and they had for a long time they had them down with their face down and their hands tied or something like that, and they couldn't get up from that position. Um, and I've even heard some story. I can't corroborate. I haven't heard it from Thunberg's mouth, but her own mouth, but they basically forced her to wrap herself around herself in an Israeli flag, and they threatened her with violence if she didn't kiss the flag that she was wrapped around with, and then to walk around all the other prisoners with that. So, you know, the world is seeing this, and the world is getting pretty pissed off about this. Israel has destroyed its soft power. It's lost its collective mind. And where do you go from there? But you just keep going because you make yourself think you keep getting away with it until the day comes you don't get away with it. And we're coming, I think, in this transit of Mars in Scorpio, which started as I said, on the 23rd of September, right after the new year began, Jewish New Year. And it's going to reach it's going to pass through a number of Israel's key planets in its birth chart in a way that if they make the run, and I was hoping, everybody's saying, oh, maybe December, maybe early next year, but everything in the last few weeks has been zeroing in now, where all my contacts are all kind of saying, well, it's probably going to be October, it's going to be in a few weeks, it's going to be very soon. And I'm going, oh man, we're heading like lemmings right over Mars and Scorpio's cliff. And so this is the what do I call it? The Iranian, I've talked about how we would see numbers, various several Cuban Missile Crisis moments. I've been saying that for over a year on this show and other shows and in my writings, that we would see a Ukrainian missile crisis, but it wouldn't be the only one. Well, that happened in October a year ago, where Biden, uh, or the people that had his EpiPen, his automatic pen, were running the show, and Biden was just drooling in the White House, I guess. Although there's some reports to say that he was very much involved with sending, so I don't know. But anyway, they the Russians at that point said, if you keep sending these ballistic missiles that you're guiding into targets deep into Russia, uh, understand this, that this means that this is no longer a war with Ukraine, because they cannot fly these. You are the flyers of these missiles. They can just launch them and salute. You're fighting us. You're fighting the Russian Federation, which has 6,000 nuclear weapons. And and by the way, the delivery systems have been all updated. You in America have 4,000, and you might even argue that some of them will never get out of the silo because they're rusting in there. Of course, you don't want a single one of them to be released, but the United States is 20 years behind in hypersonic technology. Its its weapons suck. They've been proven on the battlefield of Ukraine not to function very well. Looks like profit way supersedes quality. The F-35 is notorious as, if you have 4,000 F-35s in your Air Force, you can hope to only have 1,000 that are functional. All the rest are in the shop being fixed, and they're getting fixed and breaking down all the time. This is a common problem with a lot of U.S. weaponry. It's built to be complicated. It's built to do way too many tasks. It is not focused on the task to do really well. That's the way the Russians do theirs, and it's working. Their weapons, the world's watching. Their weapons are working in this Ukrainian war quite well. And if the mistake is made that the Israeli Air Force goes in, then the U.S. Air Force goes into, or naval air forces go into Iranian airspace, they may very well find out. FAFO, as they say. Um, to what extent Russian anti-missile, anti-plane systems are way more advanced than anything we have. We don't have much, like the Patriot's about all we've got, and it sucks. Never was any good. I remember in 1991 when it was firing and missing all the time. And because our whole strategy was, we will fill the sky with airplanes, attack planes, to counter your defense systems. But the defense systems have gotten a lot more sophisticated since that idea was out. And it's the other thing that we could be seeing is not just a little nuclear bush war, but we could be seeing the United States suffer its greatest military defeat in history. And then again, what do they do? Let's consider it. It's like what the Japanese lost in Battle of Midway. They lost the war, but they didn't have nukes to say, well, then we'll nuke them. We're not going to lose. We will take the world down with us rather than lose. And I mean, the guy with the funny little mustache from Vienna from Austria was could only hope to say, "We'll take the world down with you." We really can. So all that's kind of coming to a big Uber. We had the Iranian missile crisis already. That was in the last set of attacks in early June. Now we're going to have a new one, and we may have another Ukrainian missile crisis because now Trump is. Uh, it's almost like he got in office and somebody opened up Biden's little fly, opened up Biden's brain and stuck it in his own. You know, he's now becoming Biden. So it's I think I think if we get through to Halloween, it'll be a treat rather than a nuclear trick. So is
So
anybody
I want
go
to
ahead.
deep dive on some of these concepts that you have here. Are you familiar with this ex-Army Ranger Greg Stoker?
The name's familiar, yes.
Okay, he's from Austin, Texas, and
Yeah.
he's he's part of an organization that's Veterans Against the Gaza War. So he fought, I think, in Afghanistan.
Wow.
I think he's two tours of duty, maybe,
Hmm.
but he definitely fought in the Middle East. All right, I think he's around 31 years old.
He kind of got a shaved, he have his head shaved, but he's got a
No, he
beard.
has long. He's scruffy look and longer hair now.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, but he's
Like
part of
me.
the flotilla. He's part of that whole crew with the flotilla that's go moving toward.
Oh, I
All
saw
right.
him.
All right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the part that I want to do a deep dive on is Israeli technology, surveillance technology, and it's it's joint venture with Silicon Valley and AI, and how the United States is partially funding this, and their Silicon Valley in Israel building up these technologies to build a surveillance state, and how this is going to be percolated into it'll diffuse into our loss of constitutional rights.
Yeah.
So I see that the war in Gaza, and he makes this point actually in the last video he made. He makes this point that we've been we've been funding the war, but not just funding the war. We've been funding these different tech companies in Israel with these different joint ventures and leading to a surveillance technology that is reminiscent of exactly what Orwell was warning us about in 1984.
Yeah.
So I see one of the negative effects or the aftershock, even when the war in Gaza ends. When it ends, I don't know, but when it does end, the aftershock is not peace, but an increased surveillance state.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just from that situation. I spent most of the afternoon. I was going to put into the world the final of my 4 articles from my next Hogue Prophecy Bulletin or report, and I spent most of the afternoon listening to Daniel Lewis, I guess, a deep dive with Colonel Daniel, and he had two authors, researchers, come from very different angles to the subject, but a subject which is something I've been seeing coming. I filed my first concerns about it coming in 1997, where I basically said if this partisanship that's happening in Congress and in the country divides deeper, if the people that went into this power politics of saying divide and conquer, I mean, they were going to set up a karmic reaction which would lead that we might be in some kind of civil war by 2020. And in a way, what we have been since 2020, and that's back in 1997, I said that. Back now we are in, we've passed through 2020's election, and that I consider as the beginning of the political crisis, where basically people are not what's ripe for this surveillance thing to happen is that the American people and their leaders have been so successfully dumbed down that they do not know their rights. They do not know the Constitution. I would love to have a test of all those elected officials, and I bet you a lot of them would flunk a test on U.S. constitutional law. But and the man that would flunk the most is Donald J. Trump. Even Biden might be able to recite stuff, what's left of his memory, better than him. But you know, I'm noticing, to put it in simple terms, I am noticing a thing that I've never seen in my life before. Because my life's long. I'm nearly, in a few weeks, I'll be finishing my 70th year and beginning my 71st. And I grew up when America, you know, in the 60s, when I was a kid in the early 60s. I was born in 1955. So, you know, when I became cognizant of things in the late 50s and in the 60s, I was born into a world where America was kind of in the same place like China is today, expanding, no limits, everything building, infrastructure, freeways were being made, the country was being transformed. Our uh, people go to work and they make good money, and everybody's profiting, and there was upward mobility. I lived through all that. Then sometime starting around the 70s, the earnings got less, and uh, but the work became more. Sort of like something that one of the people I was watching reminded me that was the real cause. I think it's Peter Turshin, I think is his name. He was Soviet-born American teacher and very insightful. I was reading his treatise on something that interests me very much right now because I'm making history in the Nostradamian field. I'm actually translating Nostradamus's greater work that nobody hardly knows about. His presages in prose, his omens in prose rather than poetry, rather than in four-line quatrains, which he had filled all of his almanacs that he created starting in 1550, and then every year he'd do it until one was posthumously sent out after he died in 1566. That was for 1567. And in there is actually a larger body of narratives of Nostradamus describing local history and prophecies. But as he does in his quatrains, sometimes they jump a few years or a few centuries. So I'm literally exploring something that a lot of Nostradamians haven't even done yet, and I'm translating it as well. And the the thing that happened in the Nostradamus was his main trigger for risking his life and actually stepping out of what was considered acceptable. If you're a doctor, you can deal with astrology and humors and work with us. You can be an astrologer. It's okay if you're a medicine man, because you know you calculate the stars to know when people are going to be sick and well, which kind of moods, choleric or melancholic, or all the four humors. That was a big center of Galenist, Hippocratic medicine that he followed. But there's a pattern that, you know, people look at how, okay, there's the aristocracies to blame, you know, like the French were saying, oh, the aristocracy and the kings and all the princes, you know, were to blame for um, making things worse. And he was so the thing is that the what had happened is that you could buy wheat in at the beginning of the 1500s. You could buy wheat in France that where you could have four bushels uh, a day or something like that. You could, but it got more and more expensive for a couple factors. One was the little ice age was happening, and so crops. France is a very agrarian nation up to that point. It wasn't an industrial nation. It had about its population had grown because of warmer climates, a period of warmer, nicer winters, and all that made the bumper crops of the 1400s. But in the 1500s, the little ice age kicked in again, and it made crops harder to grow. And at a time when France had about 20 million people, 14 to 20 million people, which for the kind of technology for agrarian production was at its limit. And so what happened is that the people, just like today for us, we work harder and make less. Most people in this country work harder and make less, but it makes it expands in a small group of people to a larger extent that profit immensely from the higher prices. So so same thing happened with the royals of France and the warring Protestant Huguenot, which the majority of the princes, the minority of the Catholic princes, actually the king was Catholic. So, but it was the vast majority of France was Catholic. But the Huguenots, as they were called, the French Protestants, this was all the beginning of the seeds that would end up in long-term religious wars and struggles across Europe, especially in the 17th century, in the 1600s, the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War of Netherlands against Protestants and Catholics, which would ultimately wipe out half the population of Middle Europe in the 30 Years' War through the devastation and pillaging, which was actually more of that, more social breakdown than actual battles. There may be one battle of and with France, there were nine civil wars, nine wars of religion, they call them, which from Nostradamus lived long enough to see his prophecies fulfilled in the first one. And he died in 1566, but the first of the nine wars started in 1562 through 1563. He was even arrested in Marseille, where both sides thought that he belonged to the other side. They said, "Oh, he's a Protestant. No, he's a Catholic." He was actually a Catholic, but he was also a Jewish Catholic, so there was, the usual suspicion with that. All doctors, most of the doctors were mostly Jews or Christianized Jews, and he was Christianized Jew. His family, he was born into a family of Christianized Jews. So, but he still secretly did a lot of the rites of Judaism as well, because his idea of Catholicism was, well, universal. Then, if it's universal, then God's universal. Then God's in the Hebrew works as he's in other places, even in Islam and other places. So, I don't think he was that open to the Islamics. He was quite an Islamophobe. But then people had reasons because Europe was becoming divided. Christendom was becoming divided, Western Christendom, by Protestant and Catholic tensions, which meant, and at that time, the greatest sultan the Ottoman Empire ever created, Suleiman the Magnificent, was was at a position to expand and actually created this huge empire during that same period. A lot of it at the loss of Europe. So anyway, the what had happened. So in France, all the royals and the aristocrats and the princes and the dukes and all these people were actually making huge palaces And as the people were struggling harder and harder to make ends meet, they, and of course, rather than share the wealth, they gave them less, and that was actually the trigger. Economic imbalance of wealth is one of the key factors. Tushin kind of reminded me of this, that are one of the key factors to causing revolution or civil war. So the thing, so I was listening to these people and I'm gestating it now, and I will put it into I have an article that begins my next set of bulletins that reports that will start with this tale of two Christian apostles. One launched through his actions, launched a hot civil war in the United States. One who was martyred not long ago, Charlie Kirk. That was John Brown, by the way, in the Civil War, the last Civil War. His death may be triggering a confluence of economic tensions, religious tensions, this whole idea of, because what then happens is people, when they're suffering, when they're not making ends meet, it's easy to fall into, well, it's the Huguenots' fault. No, it's the Catholics' fault. It's the red state people. It's the blue meanies. The level of ire, the level of it's quite shocking in polls to find out how in both camps, blue and red, because the blue and gray are now becoming the blue and red in this potential civil war, which is looming, is it's amazing that upwards to 60% in both sides think the other side is responsible for everything going wrong in the United States. So, that, but uh, the thing that has to happen is that wealth has to be shared. If all the wealth, you have this aristocracy now in the United States that has all the money, and it's that holding on to all that money, impoverishing the base. That is exactly what Marie Antoinette and Louis the 16th and all these people just, oh, let them eat brioche, let them eat cake, this can disconnect to what's happening. And what happens with that, because there was a crop failure, it's called the whirlwind in French journals, that happened almost exactly what happened 364 days before the beginning of the French Revolution. Missed it a full year by a day, where this huge swath of storms came over central France, upended the crops, and by the time harvest came, and then the food was then being serviced into the following year, 1789, bread had gotten so expensive that the people rebelled. And, the people that had profited so much from expensive things to the lower classes, made their Versailles, their great palaces and all that. Well, these were stormed. The Tuileries was stormed. The people had had enough. And astrologically speaking, when you bring in the fact that we have just left Pluto out of Capricorn, where it was the great designing of modern democracy revolutions, the American Revolution, which fortunately could fight it out with two huge oceans separating it from the rest of the world. But the French people got attracted to what happened in America, and it's not surprising because Pluto was moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius, the sign of revolution. And it's in there now again. Since the end of 2024, it is now in Aquarius and will stay in Aquarius until 2044. So this period that we are in is going to see it touch over the French Revolution's birth sign of Pluto, where Pluto was in the French, that is, Revolution. And the French Revolution is what opened the door to a century of revolutions of change and struggle. So um, it could, and in that revolution also was a civil war. There was the Vendée, that there was for years during the French Revolution, the royalist areas of southwestern France and western France uh, fought Republican armies. It was a very vicious civil war. Um, uh, some of the atrocities even Nostradamus wrote about 270 years or so before. The Noyades, the drownings at Nantes. It's where they took nuns and priests, which had been defrocked, so they were in civilian clothes, and then this person took them out in flatboats in the winter, had them stripped naked and tied, men to women. They called it revolutionary marriages, and so these monks and nuns were tied to each other, naked, dropped into the flatboats, and then the flatboats' hulls were pierced, and they drowned by the thousands. And it's actually in his, that was just one of the atrocities. The atrocities were so bad that the commander who did that, even Robespierre, back in France, he had a trial. It was just even too much for him. And he's the man who launched the Great Terror with thousands of people being guillotined. So, so that's another side of this that could come out too, the wildness, the violence. Hopefully it won't, but this is, nothing's more violent than a revolution or a civil war where brother fights brother, where a French brother Protestant fights Catholic brother Protestant. And when our Civil War, although it was a surprisingly organized and a set piece battle civil war with, a whole lot of people, the two sides, the North and the South, were clearly two solid blocks, which could on their own be countries. That's what allowed it to be a real standing army, Lee's army against the Northern armies, and fight for 4 years. It killed, I think, 3% of the male population across the United States at that time. South Carolina lost like 80% of its males of 18 to 25 who fought in the South. And Carolina put a lot of people into the battles. Um, it was at least 600,000 soldiers died of exposure or wounds or being killed outright. Another million or more were wounded. And the total loss of life, from which is rarely counted, the privation that happens when foodstuffs are disrupted and civilized order is disrupted, like wars do, like destroying cities, Sherman's burning Atlanta and burning a swath down through Georgia. All that creates a situation where a lot of non-combatants end up dying from illness or dysentery or things that happen. What's mostly killing all the Palestinians right now. Um, Unfortunately, I might have talked about in the last show, but unfortunately, I had been writing about the possibility of as many people as 700,000 people being succumbing to what's going on in the Gaza genocide. And now it's come out, and I have an article in this new batch that actually, unfortunately, vindicates my feelings. And I look at the things I said for 2 years, documented it, and then I bring in these two guys from Australia who did the population count, and I have a few good excerpts from their article. And where they really show that their count was 680,000 people would have died from the, it's one thing to see people getting bombed in buildings, but when there's no buildings left, there's no hospitals left, except maybe a handful, where there's no potable water left, when there's no place to defecate that's clean, when there's no food, when you have a population, a young population of half the people in Palestine, in Gaza are mothers and children or people under the age of 21, and a whole lot of them, the majority, are under the age of 10. And you put all those people in that kind of situation, the loss of life is going to be far more extreme. And when you have the Zionist entity, the Netanyahu Zionist regime openly declaring, holding 500 trucks of UN food. They're all still there. They're making sure, and they need 500 trucks to come in a day. Well, no trucks are getting in. It takes no Nostradamus to predict that you're talking about mass starvation, and you're talking about people, hundreds of thousands of people, being in a position where they're at stage 3, I think it's stage 3 famine, where if you fed them, it could kill them. If you fed them solid food or something, it would kill them. So it's good to see people are getting riled about this. But the as I think I said, the 9 wars of religion started in 1562, and 9 of them raged up through 1598. So, 4 decades. And for a population of 14 or 20 million French people, they lost 2.5 from the massacres and from want and all that. So we could be facing similar situations. Um, and I hope I'm wrong, but civil war it's cold now, but it could go hot. And what were these two specialists were talking with Daniel Davis, where you can't rule out certain forces that want to take out certain leaders of certain movements or leaders of nations who've already been shot at a few times before they were elected. What if something like that had happened to the leader of the nation? That could trigger a civil war. And the thing that happens about it is it could be very sudden. It'll come on slow, and then when it happens, it explodes forth. Civil war or revolution. And one of the main problems, I come back from where I began in this rant, uh, is that um, the the I've watched all my life American people, from the top to the people in the streets, disconnect from their responsibilities to know the Constitution, to know your rights, and for the people that we elect to know the checks and balances that are put in the Constitution there, to make sure that people do not go corrupt, do not do what the president is doing. Basically, he just does what he wants, and he's not alone. So does the Congress. It's almost like people, when the system cannot survive the mediocrity of the people, if they degenerate into a mediocre people, it doesn't matter how good the Constitution is. It's just like any contract that you make with somebody. It can be the best contract, everything's there, all good and done and stamped. But if you're dealing with a thief or you're dealing with a fool, they won't follow the contract. Well, if we put all these fools in power, and this is not just for our country, it's also for what's going on in Europe. I mean, Keir Starmer is a fool. He's a complete nitwit. He reminds me of somebody from the and you know what he did just today or yesterday? He took the security team away from Farage, the one man who might, if there's an election, might win 300 seats in the parliament. Um, and so his response to that is not win through argument, but to take his team away. He's also been threatened, that person. Oops, oh, too bad. Well, there goes Farage. I guess I'm still, what a shame. Well, I'll even be at his funeral and say, what a terrible thing this is. You know, he has, I think, less than 20% popularity, Mr. Starmer. And the other guy is Merz, the Chancellor of Germany. God, I thought Scholz was really stupid, but Merz is uber or unterstupid, unterverrückt. You know, he's even more silly, and he's a former BlackRock CEO for whatever BlackRock has grabbed its grubby little hands on in Germany, and and then you've got another another notorious German, the woman who destroyed the German armed forces. She was awarded by being put to the top of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, and she is dumber than dirt, as Scott Ritter would say. She's a clown. Uh, I have never seen, and I've studied European history and history all over the place. I've never seen dumber people in a nuclear age. Uh,
Well, this is you hit it right on the head here. We are in an environment. There is a legacy of weapons of mass destruction, and the individuals that were part of the development and part of the foreign policy uh, framework to prevent nuclear war have left the stage.
yeah,
And now there is this legacy of weaponry with a lack of understanding.
yeah,
And it's getting very, very dangerous. See,
very.
I'm not so worried about Trump. What I'm more worried about is just that there's a confluence of things that could happen around the world, even though individually may seem very small, but
Mhm.
when you have all these different variables changing just so slightly, there's there's an additive power law that happens that
Yeah,
could lead to nuclear exchange.
yes. The good news is, uh, the West, we live in this illusion that, well, in fact, it wasn't an illusion. Since the end of the Cold War, this whole America deciding to be the unipolar world, it lasted for 30 years, but now it's over. And what's happening is, rather than 17% of the world's population, the collective West, kind of dominating the world, America and its vassals, uh, the world, there's actually, I've said it, I'll say it again, there's, with all this doom and gloom and direness, a lot of this doom and gloom and direness is coming as a reaction to Western leaders not accepting the fact that their 500-year domination of the world is over. And it's time now to adapt to the new reality and just let go of your idea of being the bully in the sandlot. You're done. You've been thumped economically. Your dollar, you slipped on your own dollar and fell on your butt because nobody wants it anymore. Something I've long predicted, that when there's a chance for the rest of the world to have a choice away from the US dollar, you're going to see a very rapid decline of US hegemony and Western European hegemony. And it's happening. The BRICS nations, there are 8 billion people on the planet, and the 17.5 million people who thought they ran it are having to pull their head out of the place where ignorance ever shines and look up and smell the new world, man. And it is not America's world anymore. It is a global community of nations who are it's and the leaders of it, the people that are helping finance it and open up doors. I mean, I'll give you an example. When America goes to Philippines, it builds an army, it builds an Air Force naval base. When China was going to the Philippines, it helped build them an electric speed train system. This is just giving an idea, that we build bases, they build infrastructure because Chinese, they don't want to dominate the world. They just want to, they like doing business, and they feel if you're going to do business, be nice to people, and I mean, there's amazing things going on. I'm trying as much as I can to bring that in because, the West is just going into this breakdown mode where it just doesn't want to, it's now not, 500 years is a long time to get yourself almost genetically under a habit. That's a lot of generations of people who just presume dominance, who are presume it as superior human beings, even though they don't talk about it, but they just say, yeah, we're here to clean up the world, the white man's burden, and not even. And the oddest thing about it is if you look at history without those Western sunglasses on, isolationist sunglasses on, you will find out that except for the last 500 years, the last 5,000 years have been dominated by Eurasia and Africa. That, the greatest economy up until the Opium Wars, the British and French inflicted upon China, China had been and remained for centuries, despite all what Europe was doing, the largest buying and selling economy in the world. And now it's returned to that. It returned, as I've said in early shows, Mao Zedong predicted in, I think, 1950 or 51 that the a real gauge of an economy is how much buying and selling and currency flow is going on. And he predicted not GDP. That's propaganda. It's not what really grows things. And when they selectively don't put food prices, a lot of GDP, Americans' GDP, they don't put the cost of living into it. They don't do it right because that would make it a lot lower. And then they'd have to bring in all as unwashed masses. And what we're doing, just like what happened in France, just like what happened in other places where the prices that go higher make the smaller classes, high classes, richer, and we get poor until we guillotine them. Unfortunately, to put it rather shocking. Uh, so so
Well, let me just
oh yeah,
interject. I think to prove your point, I'm very concerned about the debt cliff, the doom loop as they call it, with the UK. It's also happening with France.
yep,
It's
starting,
going to emerge with Germany.
yep.
Um,
They're next. They're really next because
yeah,
they're rapidly losing. They were when this war started in 2022 with Ukraine and Russia. People thought Russia was a gas station pretending to be a country. I don't know how you can call a country that's 1/6 of the Earth's surface with 11 time zones a gas station. But that was John McCain, and rest in peace. You fool. And so the so Germany, we blew up the pipeline, folks. It wasn't Ukraine. The United States under Biden blew up the pipeline in September 2022, that where all the cheap, affordable Russian gas came from, and that was directly cutting off the nose, despite the face of Germany, the fourth largest economy on the planet. That now, and this happens when empires fall. Rome started eating up its allies, just like when Rome was starting to collapse, it just gobbled up its centuries-long friends and allies, and we're doing the same thing. We're going, oh, here's an opportunity. Now we'll get all the German industry to leave Germany so that Germans don't have jobs, and our people will have jobs. Siemens will come over here, Volkswagen will come over here. And so there's a lot of people who are just saying, hey, bring on the yard sale. Let's do it. It's disgusting, but it's not a new thing here. This happens when empires start collapsing and imploding.
I have a question.
Hmm.
With Rome, in the fall of Rome, the Roman Empire,
Hmm.
was it what I'll call was their rise and fall symmetric, or was it asymmetric, meaning that their rise was over a long period of time and the fall was quick? Or was the Roman Empire more of a slow decline and eventually it just faded away?
In every sense, um, what is seen as quick, uh, if I smoked a carton of cigarettes a year, or a day, or and I got away with it hale and hearty and smoking all over the place for 40 years, those long period of 40 years go by, and then suddenly, oh, I got cancer, what, and I'm dead because I got stage 4 cancer, and that's very fast, boom. Well, it's long term. In the case of Rome, the big thing was that, well, for a long time, the Roman Senate, the kind of a form of republican democracy, did function. In fact, our government is modeled after the Roman Senate. It's not modeled after the Athens democracy, uh, because they saw what happened to the Athens democracy. It at the most lasted 80 years, and then they had Pericles and they had dictatorships because it couldn't work. It was a nice idea, but so they had a res publica, a set of laws. Now they can be democratic laws. I mean, it's not a misnomer for North Korea to call itself a republic. It is. The laws are not very free. When a lady stopped George Washington as he was walking across the street after they created the Constitution, a very difficult process, he says, well, uh, do we have a nation? And Washington looked at her and said, well, we've done our best to provide you a republic. Something like to the nature. Or do we have democracy? He said, well, we've given you a republic. And the res publica means it's a state. It's made of laws. Our government, our country is made of laws, and my God, everybody must know them, um, or you'll lose them. So so it does. So when the Republic of Rome became more and more large with more lands and became a dominant, when they defeated the Carthaginians in the three Punic Wars. They crossed a threshold that led to civil war, the triumvirate civil wars. Julius Caesar saw that basically they needed a dictator. Using Cincinnatus for a few months to stop an emergency, this thing was getting too big. So either Rome should stop growing and incorporating most of the Mediterranean as an empire, or then they could save the Republic. Something that the British did, which has gotten them this far, but now it's really going tilt. But when the British Empire started to collapse, the mortal wound was inflicted upon it in World War One. If it had not gotten into World War One, it may have lasted longer. Oddly enough, the Thucydides trap that could have happened, where one new empire is arising while the big dominant one is beginning to fade, and it always, except for one time, it always ends up with a clash. The Peloponnesian Wars was when Sparta started to become a more powerful city-state than Athens, and it ended up being a big fight, and Athens lost. That's the Peloponnesian Wars, where Thucydides, I think it was this great historian. He is a general who fought in the Peloponnesian Wars, and his writings survived the tests of time. That's where we get the idea of the trap. Now, America was rising at that time. That was a threat to the British Empire, but the big threat was that Germany suddenly, rapidly, after defeating France in the Franco-Prussian War, was building an empire, even building colonies in Africa. It joined in with all the other empires. You couldn't be an empire, a colonial empire, unless you ate off a big piece of Africa and made it your own. And so the Germans did that. They also did all the Marianas Islands, and they did a lot of things that we call territories in our empire. We're part of the German Imperial Empire that was destroyed in World War One. The mortally wounded British Empire, if it had stayed out, Germany probably would have won a kind of continental dominance in Europe, uh, because they were actually winning World War One up until the last year. In fact, in the last year, because Russia collapsed, and they ended up taking most of Ukraine, almost all the way up to Smolensk, and a lot of the Donbass area. And so at least a third or half of what Hitler wanted to take in Barbarossa and the following World War, the German Empire won. But they didn't, their leadership was dumber than dirt, not as dumb dirt as we are, but they're getting there, and they didn't really realize how close they were to winning the war. And so they tried once again with all of these freed millions of Germans to put them in the meat grinder and think a different situation would come out, and it didn't. And so they squandered all those millions, and they died, and the empire collapsed. So so uh, so it is it is important. It's like what I was watching today, and when the Daniel Davis talking to these people that and then I went to the Substack, and he's actually Tushin was, I'm sorry, I'm probably murdering his name. Apologies. Was talking about one of my most interested subjects, one the French wars of religion, and he was showing how this is a great model. And I would also add, it's also a great model for I have already been writing about what this new red versus blue civil war would look like, and I've already been comparing it to, it won't be like the Civil War, the set piece battle Civil War that we did in the past. If it turns hot, it's cold now. But and so was that cold wars of religion for decades until it finally flared up. But what you'll see is a demographic very similar to the French wars of religion and civil wars of religion. It won't be a big block of states like before. It's everybody scattered. What you'll find is, and even a deeper demographic is, that in the Sea of Red, there are two archipelagos. If you look at a map, and I have these maps in my new articles, so I call them the archipelago of the blue states, which even in their own states are generally clustered in urban areas. For instance, California, they paint it blue in these demographics, but if you actually look, and I have by county, the red and blue areas, where most of the people who are in the blue frame of mind live in the northeastern areas, a little bit in Illinois area, some islands and archipelagos there, and some archipelagos of all up and down the West Coast. But if you but the rest of the state of California and Washington and Oregon is red. And all the middle states and Texas are red with just a few little blue islands in it. So it's interesting that so in a way, I'm not surprised. I don't know if it's a plan. I don't know if it's just instinctive, but the fact that I'm going to prompt up the picture that Trump put up in his Truth Social, where he's playing the guy from Apocalypse Now, the surfer colonel who with the hat, and he's sitting there and just like the actor who played it says, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning." Sort of smell while he's trying to get these guys to surf because he actually attacked this Viet Cong base because it had really good curling waves. So that's what that whole Ride of the Valkyries and all that from Apocalypse Now. But what he's done is he's got the word shipocalypse now, as in Chicago, shipocalypse now. And he's got himself with the sunglasses, with a body that he never lifted weights to ever have in his life. And he's got the hat and the sunglasses, and he's playing, I love the smell of this in the morning. And this is, can you imagine a president of the United States uh, putting these things up? Like last set of Hogue Prophecy reports, I had him. He was putting up pictures, and I had them of him being Don Corleone. He's like sitting in Don Corleone's chair during the marriage, in the opening act of The Godfather, and it's his body, but it's Trump's head going like that, like a mafioso. And then he had this shot of him in a big coat and a big fedora, looking kind of threatening in a weird way, and then it says "Fafo," and we all now know what that means. Um, and I mean, the president is getting these things made and put into the media, and he's making statements about calling the blue people, oh, they're evil. But of course, the blue people, I can tell you because I live in a blue state, the blue people. I've been when Trump was elected in my little village. A lot of people they know I write about the future and presidential elections, and I'd come down and everybody would say, "What's going to happen now? What's going to happen?" And I'd tell them, and then I sometimes they literally melt down in the produce, have a meltdown. And so I was playing therapist, and then and they sometimes, well, he's not my president, and I'd say, well, yes, he is, just like Biden's my president. And yeah, so do we have somebody?
Well, I did a little bit of AI research here and what you were saying
Uh,
about the counties. It's very interesting, the data that came up. So based on this is based on the 2020 election. All right.
mhm.
For some reason, the AI didn't give me the 24 election, but based on the 2020 election, counties won for Republicans 2,547, Democrats 509, and then only 87 undecided. But the point to this proves your point, though, that
Yeah.
there's actually, when you slice the data, not through popular vote or electoral college, but if you just slice the data based on who wins a particular county,
Yeah.
there's by far more Republicans than Democrats in the country.
If
By
you
far.
count
It's not even
acreage,
close. And this is where
well,
the silent majority,
yeah,
centrist, slightly right of center
yeah.
comes from.
And you know what else happens that even these results, well, they do kind of show it. Thanks to the people in the MAGA movement that have been, kind of what's the term everybody uses when you're kind of a personality online? You're an influencer.
Yeah.
Trump had some very powerful influencers, people that I watch. That's I'm not left or right. I'm not left wing or right wing. I'm free wing. I look at what works. Or if you want to say, I'm a constitutionalist. And, we didn't even have political parties when the Constitution was created. In fact, they were hoping people wouldn't make political parties, our founding fathers and mothers. And when it started happening, a lot of people were concerned. I've just heard that I have not yet read Washington's farewell address after being the first president in 2 terms, kind of setting the stage for what a president can and can't do. And I must read it because apparently he's quite prescient, describing he knew American people well and what the potential things could happen, how the democracy could be derailed. And apparently there's quite a lot of prescient statements he made, even foreshadowing probably the Civil War and all that had happened 70 some years later. And so it's one thing I'm going to read tomorrow. Make sure I read that thing. So I'm going in a crash course in how civil wars happen and how they can come up in different forms, as I've said. Um, but yes,
Do you
it's
think the Civil War is really against the two polar opposites, the ultra right versus the ultra left? Or do you think it's
well, what I hope it would happen is it might start that way. Like I say, revolutions and civil wars. Sometimes there's revolutions within civil wars, and there's civil wars within revolutions. Vendée, as I was saying earlier, in the French Revolution. Um, I mean, there was also a revolution in the wars of religion. There was a rebellion where the Parisians in the capital were so sick and tired of all these. I mean, it got to the point where not only were the Huguenot armies, but because the Guise family was trying to kind of push out the Valois as the kings, the Catholic League was created as a military force for the Valois kings. But Henry III, the son of Henry II, who died in the jousting accident, which caused them all to be too not mature for leadership yet, and that was the other problem. Another problem we've got a weak uh, capital system. The king of France who could run the country when he had the jousting accident and mortally killed himself, he left babies, and Catherine de' Medici in a bind where the Salic law of France did not allow women to be queens. I mean, queens with power. She was queen, but just more like called a queen, la reine, but just consort. And so, but she was quite a formidable person, and she actually probably came closer to running as the queen mother of the Charles IX, who was still a child, young, and she kind of unofficially ran France, but it was weak. So it means all these powerhouses, like the Landsraad and Dune, they all started to make moves, and it's clear actually. It's clear that I mean, there was a lot of it was about power, not about religion, because it's clear that all those 9 wars ended when um, when Henry of Navarre, who was a Bourbon, which later, when the Valois ended up dropping and or dying and getting assassinated until there was no more Valois to run France. The next major royal family would have been the Bourbon, but he was a Protestant. Now he did become Henry IV in the last 2 or 3 wars of religion. He was still fighting the Catholic League and the Guise, who still wanted to usurp a petty royal family, still wanted, but a lot of spunk, were really trying to take over. But in that process, there was in the Civil War, the Parisian city declared independence from all of them, and they were eventually their leaders were lured into a trap and they were all slaughtered by the Duke of Mayenne, the Guise. But so it went back. But you can even have revolutions in a set piece war. It happened again in 1871 when the French armies of Napoleon III and the Napoleon Empire Second Empire collapsed in the Franco-Prussian War. When Prussia, actually, you could call it the Franco-German War because the German states united, and that's where the German Empire was created. And France was collapsed in defeat. They reformed a new republic, but the people, the working class, the people, the socialists, and all that were not getting paid enough for the work and labors that they did, they declared the Commune, the Paris Commune, and independence from the rest of the country. So it's happened twice in French history, in a set piece war and in a civil war, that revolutions can sprout up. And you may find there's going to be an Arizona revolution or a Texas revolution or a California revolution. Um, but the interesting thing about it too is that I talk about this a little bit in my overview of the demographics of the Cold Civil War is, yes, the majority of people actually, it's not so clear that the majority of people are in the blue slot. I mean, certainly they might be, but not politically active. Those influencers, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, Candace Owen, and others, they really influenced people to vote for Trump. Charlie Kirk is responsible for getting almost all the Democrat young voters to leave Biden and vote for Trump.
Right.
That was the key. That was the nail in the coffin of Biden's second term demented dreams.
See, to get to this Civil War revolution, I'm also seeing it within these influencers. Like, for example, I had this conversation with Gail today. Um, Candace Owen, all right, major influencer, but it gets to the point where it's a monetization where it's shock jock. You got to turn into a shock jock. You have to create this
Yeah.
soap opera mentality.
Yeah.
You need to get views and clicks, and it gets to the point where there's infighting even within the Republican tent,
Well,
right? And
yeah.
then there's
Yeah.
obviously fighting between the liberal podcasters versus the conservative podcasters, but you can see as a microcosm in social media this civil war that's already starting to brew.
Yeah. And when you look at what happened to the guy, and the Battle of the Night shows,
Yeah.
uh, the night shows are disappearing. All the blue meanies who want to talk about not make fun and funny, and Johnny Carson lasts a long time because he said, look, I'm just an entertainer, I'm just going to make people laugh. I mean, I might get kind of close to some stuff, but I'll make it fair and fun. But I remember Stephen Colbert was, when he was playing a spoof on kind of being an amalgam of all the different Fox anchors when he was doing the Colbert Report. It was brilliant. I loved it. I used to appear on CNN and Fox and all that stuff, and I used to debate um, um,
Well, I think that these
Hannity, so it
right.
was
I think
so.
even mainstream media's quality has gone down. It's turned into, what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of lawyers that aren't practicing law that end
Yeah,
up getting a contract over at a media station or whatever, and and then they pontificate and they love to argue, and it turns into an educated version of Jerry Springer, but it's still Jerry Springer.
yeah.
I mean, the only thing they're not
It is where
doing.
they've all Springered out from, from Jerry Springer. That's a good one. That's really deep down this whole species of influencers. have
Yeah, no,
sprung from the loins of Jerry Springer.
no, I think that's what's happening. If you look, a lot of these podcasters, they start off and they have a nice
Yeah,
trajectory. You're learning things from them. They may have a unique perspective, and
yeah,
then all of a sudden it devolves and it turns into a free for all. There's a lot of infighting. It turns into soap opera. And there's this new guy, this Nick, what's his name?
Fuentes.
Fuentes, right?
What
Yeah,
a lugubrious fellow he is.
yeah. I mean,
I can tell you from what Candace has talked about and the others have talked about, he's kind of a two-faced guy. He's just there to,
well, I think he knows on how to push the buttons to get the
yeah,
viewership. And this is the point that I'm making, is that it gets to the
yeah,
point where it's shock jock.
yeah, yeah,
It reminds me of Howard Stern back in the early days
yeah,
of Howard Stern in the 1990s, where he was the shock jock, late night radio, and the shops around the world, around the country would be listening because they
yeah,
were doing the midnight shift.
yeah.
That's where, and he could say anything he wanted because it was late night. You
He's
know,
kind of an influencer toot,
yeah.
like
Well,
a prostitute.
but it got to the point where he became
Yeah.
so well known. He had this big contract with Sirius Radio, and he started,
He
uh,
gave good
yeah.
headphones. He gave good headphones. Yeah,
So
kind of a sexual rush.
yeah, no, there's definitely, I just see that the beginnings of this devolving aspect of podcasts that we see now. I would say that you could pinpoint it to the 1990s
Mm.
and the shock jock stuff that was
Yeah.
going on late night.
Yeah, it's history repeating itself. It rhymes, at least, as Mark Twain would say. But yeah, there's a lot of that. The other thing too is the untoward influence of the Zionist Israeli regime is quite extensive, to the point. I'm not in this article even going to try to go down the rabbit hole. I've been down there, of all the theories of what happened to Charlie Kirk, who killed him, and all of that. I'm just going to step over that and just deal with the aftermath, which is the bigger picture. I was highly recommend that if you're going to listen to somebody who's actually from the left, who's a brilliant journalist, Max Blumenthal, from the Gray Zone. He busted the lid on all that. It was the biggest scoop of his career so far, of finding out, how all the I call them the manipulators, were, he was, Kirk was starting to wake up to the fact there's a genocide going on, and that he couldn't support it. He got his eyes opened, and he was showing the strain of these sessions where he had to be with Ackerman and all these other new influencers, which were all a bunch of basically TV whores, male and female, just trying to be the talk jock or the talk jockette. And had no time. I mean, I've watched some of these people. I can't believe them. I mean, they're just slop shows. It's just, um, you know, uh, we are influencers of trashy brains.
Well, I don't even like watching that stuff. I just
I
feel
don't.
dumber if I watch that stuff. But what I've been pivoting to in terms of podcasts that I listen to, it's it's something benign, like a cooking show. Like there's this really good podcast for the ones that are watching. I recommend it. It's called OTR, and it just talks about the history of food, like the history of rice. And
Yeah.
he's a chef, and he just enjoys
Yeah.
teaching history, and he does these great.
Food for thought.
But you can learn a lot about just civilization by food, the cuisine, and how it moved over
Oh,
centuries.
the history of food, the
Yeah.
thread of food history, of what we eat, and how we meet. I mean, this is what made Anthony Bourdain so amazing.
Yeah.
He saw the world through the dinner and lunch table and the breakfast table, and you know that food is one of the most intimate sharings all over the world, and it was brilliant what he did, unique. But I will say this about the influencers. I mean, Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, and I sometimes think that Candace is good, but I think she's straying into the talk jockette. We've completely forgotten the whole thing with the Madam President's Schwanstucker. It's like, Macron's wife, you know, quote unquote. And that was all going down that rabbit hole for a long, long time. And because, the French president and his wife actually sued her. And and I mean, this is what she does. But gosh, I don't know. It's I don't watch her as much anymore because it's sort of like, and now it's just forget that. Now it's Charlie Kirk, and we're into that. I think what helps, like another great guy that does this is well, he's in Brazil now. He's he's the reporter that helped um uh the guy to go to Russia, after he blew the lid on all the surveillance that was going on.
Oh,
Snowden.
Snowden.
Yeah.
Snowden.
Yeah, I can't think of his name right now, but he had to actually leave the country. He lives in Brazil now, but he's been there. He's actually a very interesting person to watch. Um, I, Greenwald,
Greenwald.
Greenwald.
Greenwald was involved with Snowden. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was. So, he lives, he got a family and all that, and he kind of he lived with he's
New York Times.
gay.
Well, the Greenwald that worked for. Wow, I didn't know that he
Yeah,
moved.
one of the great journalists, one of the rare few left. I mean, Max Blumenthal is one of them. His one that I really love, that her breaking the set that she did on RT America. That's where I got into Abby Martin, who has done she does Empire Files, and it is a remarkable work of journalism what she does. She's done some of the best journalism of what life was like in Gaza before it all went down. And so, she's brilliant. Um, and and in a strange way, Joe Rogan is the Walter Cronkite of our times. Somebody said that, and I said, that fits, because Walter Cronkite, everybody listened to Walter, left, right, it didn't matter. He was kind of in the middle of everything. And then when he did that famous report after being in Vietnam, he says, "Well, I don't think that we'll be able to win the Vietnam War." And President Johnson, he used to have three TVs going on at once, so he had all three networks when we only had three networks, and he would watch all three of them, and then kind of go back and forth, and then he's watching there, and he's clicking on his big, thick-looking remote, probably about this size big or something. Gotta hold it like this, and in those days, and he says, well, if I've lost Walter Cronkite, then I gotta get out of this war. And that's really where he resigned and said he wasn't going to run for a second term and all that. It was when he heard Walter Cronkite saying that this war cannot be won. And Joe Rogan, when Joe Rogan had Trump on his show, that was also a huge push. And Joe's not coming from, Joe's kind of a hippie from the left.
All right. Right.
He's not a right-wing guy, but he's kind of what works. So I can see a lot of these people like prima donnas coming and going, but I think if something happens to them from, in our shoot happy country, um, that I think people like Tucker Carlson and Greenwald and Rogan will kind of last long. They'll do the Cronkite life cycle. You
Well,
know?
kind of, yeah, I was explaining this to Gail and also Miss Taiwan too. Um, I'm starting to experiment with AI and Grok and like how to
Mm,
use it
mm,
instead of Google. All right.
mm.
And if you know how to search, if you're a researcher and you know how to really use it as a tool, you can get some really good insight quickly.
That's what I'm going through with
Right.
16th
So
century
so
French. It's an explosion.
so what I did was is that I asked Grok, give me the top 10 characteristics of a Harvard man in 1945. And then give me the top 10 characteristics in 2025 to do a compare and contrast.
Hmm.
And what was interesting was is that one, the Harvard man of 1945, patriotic, athletic, was into uh, family and very competitive scholastically and with sports, uh, tied into a social network to try to rise up or maintain a certain socioeconomic class.
Mhm.
Okay? All right. And also an affinity towards the classics, knowing
Hmm.
the classics, a liberal arts education.
Yep.
All right. You fast forward to 2025, not involved in sports.
Yep.
They were they were cherry picking coursework to have a higher GPA. So they weren't taking courses that were challenging to them. They stuck too much with the STEM and not enough with some of the
Mhm.
humanities. And they all wanted to be a tech bro. They wanted to drop
Yeah.
out and be a Zuckerberg.
Yeah, and then
And
and then
that's
what?
and that's so you so these are there's a huge shift, John,
Well,
that has happened from that greatest generation crowd
to the
to
stupid
now.
generation.
Yeah, yeah. And so this is a big part of why America is failing.
Well, and then the thing I watched, a crash course on Charlie Kirk because I knew of him. I know a lot, but when this all happened, I really had to really focus on him. I watched hours and hours of his interchanges with all these college graduates, and it was a testimony to what a complete failure higher learning has become. We are fulfilling Nostradamus's prophecy about our times. Oh, what a great loss of learning and letters will there be at that time. We it's something I wrote about 20 years ago. I said I can see a future where we will have a a, a human being, American citizens that are technologically advanced but socially primitive, and rather troglodyte stupid, but they can make your computer run, and they can embrace AI like Dr. Frankenstein embraced his monster, you know. So I've always said it's my kind of main statement about Antichrist is the Antichrist. I know the name of the Antichrist. The Antichrist's name is stupid with a capital S. It's being stupid. I mean, Osho, my master, used to say that there's fundamentally only one evil in the world: unconscious behavior, being unconscious of yourself. And there's only one virtue: being aware of yourself, being conscious, because that's where God can come in. Doesn't matter. God is consciousness. The devil is dumb. The devil
What
is being an automaton with a degree. And boy, did Charlie Kirk, was, man, one of the things I wish this never happened, because I wish he never got shot, but I I wanted to write something about how I would debate with him. it wasn't the right time for that, so I probably put that for future. So I put that article out of the set, but he said, prove me wrong. It was a nice challenge. It was always written on the podium and stuff where he would do his things. And it was great where he's got this guy who comes up and he's going to talk, and he's nervous and stuff, but he's a graduate student and he's coming up in there and says, well, I think you're this and that, and I said, well, let's have a discussion, let's have a dialogue, let's have a debate. Come, and Charlie was really great with that. He'd say, "Have a debate." So the guy went, come up to Mike. He comes up, and then he just says, it's not a debate, it's just a dump. He just dump it. And he's going, oh, you're this and that, you're this and you're that, I hate you, and this is the guy with the degree that his mother and father squandered a fortune for.
Right.
And he says, and you're a racist, and that's when Charlie just said, how am I a racist? Tell me, when I've said anything that could be called an act of racism, a statement of racism. He just went, because he obviously never listened to the man, or he did it went out through one ear through the big gap that's called the empty skull out the other. Now, I had answers because I studied him. And I said, well, actually, I was got rather surprised. A couple of years back, you talked about, you did a couple things. You talked about how this is what I'd like. You were talking about the threat of Islamic extremism in our country. And you were getting kind of burning with it, You were kind of, well, I want a country where the streets are safe, where my family and I can thrive, where my kids can go to school and not be attacked by terrorists and this and that. And then he got more and more impassioned, more and more impassioned. And he says, and I don't want to hear any muezzins and minarets reciting Muslim prayers in my neighborhood. And he said that. And I said, that, Charlie, is a racist statement. Because you know why? Because actually, all the things that you listed that you wanted, conservative values, if you actually intermingled with Muslims like I did in India, you would find common ground with them. They also want safe schools. They also want their homes to be protected. They want exactly what you want. And frankly, I've lived in a country that has Hindu priests doing their calls, Muslim priests doing their five prayers. And frankly, uh, if you can tolerate that, just like people in Russia tolerate that. There is so much peace between the religions in the Russian Federation. And they've come a hard way. When Russia collapsed, the Soviet Union collapsed, there were the two Chechen wars, which were absolutely savage. But I mean, I watched those wars. I didn't see how that was going to end. I saw what happened at Beslan. I saw the footage where the terrorists from the Chechen terrorists came in and wired the whole place to blow it up with 400 kids in it. The first day of school, elementary school kids. And they finally had to storm in and they tripped the wires and hundreds of people got killed. It was a terrible, and it was so hot that day that like the kids had most in their underwear and stuff. It was like too hot. And it was just awful to see, and the parents waiting and the cops not knowing what to do. And then they kind of went blunt-ended in there. And there was this woman, a Chechen woman that was on this big platform that she had her feet on, and if she lifted her feet, the whole thing would blow up. And so, and then the kids are all around it. It's terrible. But then what Putin did, he finally got in touch with the leader, and he says, "We don't want this war to continue. It's destroying everything. Do you want it to continue?" He said, "No, I don't want it." Well, let's make the difficult steps out of this mess that we're both in. and bring peace back. And you know what? You go to Chechnya now, because Chechens don't have a big population. They're a small tribe. And so they were being decimated by the war. So they if they kept fighting, there wouldn't be any Chechens anymore. And so, and their culture, it was rich, would be gone. You go to Grozny now, which was absolutely devastating, even worse than Stalingrad. You see a beautiful city risen out of it. Beautiful city. And now I never imagined this kind of turn. Well, I hope this kind of turn can happen in all the things we've been talking about. This kind of full circle where it comes back, where you can't imagine it will come back, like constitutional literacy and all that. Um, it it's just like with South Africa. It's the same with the Chechen wars. It's like it looked like how can that ever end without one race being completely annihilated and everybody? Um, it it worked out. And now, if you want to find, now the Chechens are proud to be an autonomous nation within the Federation of the Russian Federation. They even are some of the best fighters in Ukraine. Ludnov, the general there, and stuff. They are proud to be Russian. They see Russia as like we see America. And you will find in Kazan, you will find in Moscow many mosques. You will find that the religions work can live together. There are Buddhists. You know, there's 140 ethnic groups living in the Russian Federation, and there are all the major religions. And they're not having riots now. They've worked that all out. They have respect for each other, and let people be, as they are and as they go. Um, that's what I hope will happen with people who identify themselves as being blue or meanies or rednecks or something, I hope that will happen. We may have to go through a purging. I hope not. Uh, all my career as a forecaster, I've never wanted any of my darker visions to have happen. They usually do, but I'm always hopeful that that will not happen. That's why I talk about them. I'm not trying to do this to scare people, but I am trying to tell you there's a fire and you got to put it out. And if you just want to deny the fire's there, you will be burned. Don't make me right.
Let me just add in before we tell the audience to go to your website, and we'll talk about the periodicals and the readings. But back in 2022, I did a video. It would, and the ones that are listening that have been watching my channel will know which video it is. But I did a video uh, in comparing what was going on in Hollywood during the, the COVID crisis, and how they were shutting down Hollywood, and that they put on hold the release of Top Gun Maverick,
Mm,
which ended up being a major grossing,
huge hit.
right? Because back in the 80s, and I'm a child of the 80s, well, I was born in the 70s, but I was raised in basically
Yeah.
my formative years were really the 80s. But that Top Gun was huge. It was a huge,
Oh, yeah.
right? So when
I
I
used to watch it in the commune.
when I knew that they were going to release Top Gun 2.0, I knew that it was going to be $1 billion film.
Yeah.
And then they were in post production when COVID happened.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, they got that far. That's good.
Right. So they held off, and when Hollywood decided to do the release, I made a statement that said you have a lot of individuals using data, consumer data, to determine if they should release a film of that magnitude. That is a signal that we are getting out of the COVID era. even though it had nothing to do with
Yeah, yeah.
pathology or,
But it had
spread
something to do with,
a pathogen or anything. It was just the economics of Hollywood.
but it
Data.
also was catching the zeitgeist
Right,
when the
right.
geist has changed. And the whole thing about Maverick is he's a rebel. He's free. He's unorthodox. He's in a command structure, and the structure can't stand the way he's the Maverick. They let him do it. That's why it's great to have Ed Harris play the wizened old admiral and all of that too.
But what is interesting is that, okay, I do this
But
video.
we were being freed of this farce called the shutdown.
Right. So I did this video in 2022 about this is a data point that's hinting that we're getting closer, that we're getting out of this COVID, the COVID era. All right. Now, fast forward. Now you got to remember, we thought that we didn't know if Trump was coming back in 2024. It was, I mean, he was getting a lot of lawfare and all this stuff. Who knew? All right.
Another symptom of civil war
But
coming.
yes, it was yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Was the 250th anniversary of the Navy? Maybe it was today. But either way, it was either today or yesterday. And he's in a helicopter. He's landing on an air. I think it was an aircraft carrier, and it was to the soundtrack to Top Gun. so,
Climb into
so
the danger zone.
all right, and in that film, the point I'm making is that these are connected. That film represented, well, it was a human heading that was a pilot transitioning from a human pilot to AI piloting.
Yeah.
And it was Iran, and it was about a nuclear facility that they were going to bomb and all this. So there was these hints of in Hollywood or in art that hint to what's going to happen in the future or maybe in the
Well,
near.
the arts are always prophetic.
Yeah,
Even when they're not trying to be.
when I heard that, when I saw the video of him in the helicopter, they were playing Top Gun. I immediately thought of 2022 and
Yeah,
how
and did you notice?
Hollywood was hinting. It was a data point that there was going to be a change. I like the term that used, the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist was the understanding, getting a pulse of that zeitgeist gave you um, some a level of understanding where the society is going to be going in the near term.
And some of it's manipulated. I mean, this multi-million-dollar dragging hundreds of generals from their posts to sit and watch Pete Hegseth flex his muscles as the Secretary of War, and talk about their fat bodiness, and him and Trump both in their, and the generals did not applaud Trump at all and all of that. Even he said, "Well, you're not even going to laugh, huh?" And did you notice the big American flag? Uh, Very Hollywood. It's the
Very
flag was a
Patton-esque. It reminded me of Patton.
Well, it is the patent flag where he comes up and ba, 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 and he does the whole pep talk. I mean, it's ironic because I've even considered the possibility during the assassination attempt at Butler, PA. I actually wrote some interesting articles about that to bring up the reincarnation possibility because he kind of thinks that he was Patton. People think he's Patton. It's uncanny how I had photos to show how there's a lot of similarities. There is even though it's not a 9-month difference between his death, Patton's death, and Trump's birth in 1945, 46, I'm sorry, 14th of June. Um, there's debate even in reincarnation that, you don't, until the body's more form than just a little bit, that the soul may not actually come in to the body until later, when it's really a fetus, not just looking like a turtle or a fish or some with black dots or something
In
like that.
Judaic thought, you do not mourn the death of a child until after the third year.
Yeah, the
The-
third stage.
yeah, so the third year, so you mourn an individual that has a soul. So the thought is that in utero, it doesn't have a soul yet,
Yeah,
and
yeah. So
it
there's
doesn't even have a soul until the third year after birth.
Yeah, so it's an interesting part of the reincarnation or how religions look at life, and it's interesting that he does fit in the window of that.
And just
Um,
we
and
do.
so it could be possible. Well, you know, I Patton was an amazing movie. It was one of Osho's favorite films. He is one of the only time that Osho asked everybody in the commune to watch a film because he really wanted to share. He thought it was really great. It was um, one that's changed my life. It was the Orson Welles, Nostradamus, the man who saw tomorrow. He was really into that, so I went in and saw it, and that kind of rekindled my whole work again with Nostradamus, which the rest is history. That would have been back in 1983, and the other was Patton. He really liked the film Patton. It is a great film, but I gotta say, I think this is my opinion. Probably a lot of people are going to be upset with me for saying this, but I can understand why the German general staff saw him as a bigger threat than most of the other people because he thought and acted like a panzer general, you know, or he thought and acted like some of the Soviet tank army commanders. In fact, the guy in the famous scene where he says they're going to have the interpreters talking to, he's got the Russian general there, and Patton is there, and he's being very cold, and he's making sure all of his staff, like somebody comes up and offers him something, and he takes it, and then Patton just looks at him, smoldering, and everybody's looking at him because he doesn't like Russians. And so the scene is that the man goes, well, hey, um, the general here would like to toast to you for our mutual victory. And he says, and Patton said, you tell your general this, every word. I will not drink a toast with him or any other Russian SOB. I said the full thing. I won't say it out loud. And he said, well, I can't say that. Say it, every word. And so he goes, and then the guy's looking innocently, and then the face changes because that's a sukumsin. And he goes, что это sukumsin? And he goes, well, he thinks, my general says that he thinks you're a SOB too. And Patton, grim face, suddenly breaks into a smile. He says, yeah, I can drink to that. Two, and he says, tell them two SOBs together, we can drink. And he goes, oh, so comes in. They go, oh, so comes in. And then they go and they do the arm around and drink each other's glass. Now, I thought, now this is a real general, this Soviet general. So after years, I said, he was a tank guy too, apparently. And I read about him. Patton's military career is like this. And his career, that Russian, is this. When it comes to combat and fighting, the best the Germans had at Kursk, at Stalingrad, and Operation Little Mars, and Uranus, and Bagration, all these vast, biggest battles in the history of humanity going on in the Eastern Front. That general had done so much more than Patton did. And so, I think compared to that man, Patton's overrated.
We do have a question
Oh,
before
good.
we wrap up here.
Bad boy. Bad boy.
So,
Don't say that about Patton.
um, this individual, I'm going to read this. I wanted to hear John Hogue's take on the flower of life in its holographic nature. What does he think about this? What are his thoughts surrounding the sacred geometry and our reality?
Well, it's interesting from a personal point of view. It is interesting how metaphors about a mystery which really can only be hinted at and not really described because it's being described by the illusion, by that which is changeable, in this beautiful creation of the source that's oceanic, that makes infinite waves upon its surface. Some of the waves think that they're waves, and they're searching for an ocean that they can never find because they are the ocean. And you'll notice that in even when you look at the pictures of the lotus expanding over Buddha's head or a Hindu saint's head, it's going lotus petals after lotus petals after lotus petals, lotus petals. If you've ever had a moment, an unguarded moment where you get a glimpse of what you've forgotten, what you came here as, what you still are, you cannot be otherwise. Um, I can see where the metaphors have tried to express the movement of something that does not move, the expansion of something that is not there at all. And it does this perfectly. And I can see why the geometry, the hint of what's going on, can take on the metaphor of flowering. They even said it. A Buddha has flowered. A mystic has flowered. Saint Francis flowered. Bar Shem Tov flowered.
Okay,
See,
well,
that's why I love it. If you all ask, it's you don't know what I'm going to say. I didn't even know what I'm going to say. So if more people ask questions, ask anything, and then I'll be as surprised as you what comes out.
I was surprised because I didn't
I
know
was
anything
surprised
about
too.
the flower of life. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So we're to the to
The
our cutoff
witching hour.
witching hour.
Your witching hour.
I'm
Almost. It's still 9 o'clock here.
right there. East Coast witching hour.
Yes,
So I want to
Paul's
remind
going to turn into a pumpkin if we don't stop this show right away.
so the audience in the description there's a link. Just click the link and that will take you to John's website and you can sign up for his periodical and you can sign up for a reading. So I'm going to have John explaining the periodicals and the readings for the individuals that don't know, but please click that link and help support the work that John does.
Yeah, that link will link you to my free sample website for my free samples of articles and also excerpts of articles. And that's hoagprophecy.com. And you will, you will, I'm different when I'm writing. I'm a little more freestyle, but I have a whole other voice. It's playful too, but it's literate and all the names are there, the things that I can't remember when I'm speaking off the cuff, um, are all there. And it goes a lot deeper. So if you can take this memory of me in glorious 2 dimensions, and if you can hear my voice in the writing, it's kind of a whole deeper level of doing what I do, reading the world. And if you think the things that I've said are unusual or surprising, it's even more so when you read them in the Hogue Prophecy Report, which comes out roughly every month or 2 months, depends. Sometimes they get really big. The last one was over 60,000 words and 8 articles, but it was a lot to say this summer. I started writing it in May and ended it in early August. This one's a lot shorter. that I'm doing, and it hopefully they'll come out more frequently too. But these I send them on an email. You basically, if you go to my HogueProphecy.com, you will see one article or one and a half articles free, and then you will get excerpts. And then there's also a link with a green eye that's looking up with a whole bunch of forests in its pupil. And then you click on that, you can get for $60, for $5 a month, you get a full year of Hogue Prophecy reports. And there's another section at the end of the free part where it gives you more options, not just the uh, 12 months, but you can also sign up for an automatic payment and just do $5 a month or more, if you feel to do more. Same with the $60. If you feel to give a little more, it helps as well. But 60 is also great if more of you read me. And what will happen is I'll see in my PayPal stuff, I will see your payment, and I'll see the email that you send. And sometimes I give instructions on, if you want to get one of the free, like right now I have a thing where if you subscribe now, you're going to get my last set of articles free, which was quite epic. And so you what will happen is I will attach a PDF file with a fully illustrated Hogue Prophecy report to your email in return once you get it done. And then once you're there, you will be receiving them by email. This is the way that I keep my First Amendment rights unsullied by what some of these platforms do. Because you're going to hear things that are controversial, unusual, uh, really different takes on things. And so that's why I send it as an email. And also on the email, after you see the table, the main first marquee picture, and then you see the table of contents, um, you're going to see a third page, which I try to put in as big as print as I can. And because I send you an Adobe file. So if it's a link to get a free app to get Adobe Liquid. And then you can read my articles on a cell phone, and it's perfect to read. It's easy to read. It's not little chicken feed, which you're trying to move yourself around. And so if you get on, don't miss it, because I know some of my readers have been doing this for years. They scroll over that and then they go, "What? It's just getting so small. How can I work?" And I said, "Well, 2 years ago, just look underneath the table of contents. There it is saying, stop looking at a dinky cell phone thing. Here, get the liquid, and it's free, and it works. It's wonderful." So so yeah, these that's really important thing. The other two is if you want to just be in a free situation, I have if you go to the contact button on my hogueprophecy.com, you can get onto my free Hogue Prophecy Bulletin, which is where I tell people when I'm on TV or or I announce when my articles are out, and then you can either get them at 12. You can read it tells you where that I got stuff up for you to read free. And hopefully, if you can help, you will subscribe and do those two options, plus another option that a lot of my people do who read me. They do it month to month. They just look and they go, "Okay, here, I'll give you $5, $10 for that one." And it's just a one-time thing, but they get the articles. So there's three options. And in this world, and we're alternative media. Paul and I and so many other people we are not mainstream media where we got billionaires paying us huge sums of money. Now they're well paid, but they're poor in what they deliver to you. They are not left, right, or center. If it's mainstream media, they are not telling you what's going on. They're hauling in a lot of dough to um, and not doing their jobs because they're not allowed to. Now, there's a lot of people that used to be in that media. I used to be in that media. A lot of good people we're now freelance. We're now on our own. We survive through the charity of your ability to support us in any way you can, anything you have a yes for. And so we are completely publicly funded. I am completely publicly funded. And we are rich in what we can share to you, but we're always needing more people to help us finance these things because it takes money to do these things. Not as much money as they waste on Fox and CNN and CBS and all those, and UBS and CBS and NBS, NBC. In what was it? In a network, Patty Chayefsky's great movie on network about the networks and satires. And I love that they decided because there's NBC, CBS, ABC. They became United Broadcasting Company, so they were UBS. Welcome to UBS, but actually it's we who BS you. You know? So, so yes, that's how you can help me out, and I also put a lot of funny stuff in it. You gotta laugh at these dark times, and it's very important. Seriousness is a dis-ease.
You also do readings.
Yes, I do. Yes, thanks for reminding me. I do. I do readings, and the it's the say you see me dressed like this in this office somewhere on Whidbey Island, and in the glorious northwestern Washington state, and and these can these I set them up so that they can go as long as they need. Sometimes they go an hour, sometimes they go 2.5 hours. So, I mean, we really go deep, and you'll be amazed because what happens in these readings, time disappears. Both the reader and the readee are often shocked at how quickly the time went by, as it was just in this now space. And I read. We start with your astrology, and if you want, you can also not want it, and we can just do the cards and just a basic trans medium reading. Um, and it's it's been fascinating and wonderful to now that I came back after a hiatus of 26 years. I didn't read when 1992 some this big opening happened where was feeling the whole world, and one of the things that got crowded out of that was doing private readings. I don't know why, but it was important. I didn't understand why until 26 years later when private readings came back. Um, this work is a trance medium, an empathic medium, that is. Um, the work you do is nothing. You don't, it's quite a work. You are available. And then, I mean, you do the work and the study of what's going on in the world, but the actual moment of oracular experience, whether it's a one-on-one reading or reading the world, has become the same thing. And what I discovered coming back into reading is that the there was no more reader. There was just the reading coming through me, as like it does with the world. So people love these readings. I love doing them with you. It's just wonderful and very opening and helpful. Um, Very few people are disappointed. We're all surprised where we go, but in these mysteries, in these readings. So if you want a reading, you go to hogueprophecy.com, and at the very top, you'll see a little paragraph there's in red line saying, Hogue readings. Get a Hogue reading. And then it will give you an email, and then you click on that email. And what you then put is, if you don't want to, you don't have to introduce yourself at this point because I'm going to come right back and we'll be interacting later immediately as soon as I see your email. And all you need to do is put in the subject line Hogue reading, and I'll see that because I tend to keep my computer wide open, protected, but wide open because I don't want any of the algorithms in my computer censoring people that I had no idea tried to reach me. So unfortunately, I have to go through a lot of junk mail doing that, hundreds of things. But that's why if you keep it simple and just keep it that Hogue reading, I'll see that in the sea of junk mail that's coming through, and I will get back to you, and I will give you an overview of what the reading entails, how to pay for it, how to get a free astrology chart from astro.com. It's really a fine chart, best out there design wise, and we'll set up the time, and I mostly do it at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard. So for the North American crowd, um, I find that 5 p.m. also works in Australia, so in the morning of the following day. And also, I I do 11 a.m. or 11 or 12 for British Greenwich Mean Time and Central European Time. But I can also, if you're out like someone was once, out in the middle of the Pacific in some desert island chain, I'll make arrangements so that that can work too. Because I read people all over the world.
All right. Well, individuals, please click that link. It's in the description box, and that'll take you to John's website. Thank
You
you.
know what? You know what an individual is? It's an undivide you all. And revolution hasn't really happened yet. It happens in spiritual matters, complete revolution. Otherwise, it often in political matters, revolution is react illusion. So
Thank
we
you.
have to just change that and
Okay.
undivide you all.
Well, I'm gonna turn into a pumpkin here. So
Yes, he is. He's already getting orange, a little bit orange. I don't know.
an orange
If
man.
if I were getting orange, it'd be gout in my toe. But
You know what's amazing? With every time I bump into someone in New York, because it's such a liberal town, is
yeah,
everything that Trump does is bad. Orange man bad syndrome
orange bad man syndrome.
is everywhere. It's sad. It's really sad.
It is, and that's how the Civil War goes. Yeah, if you're walking down a street in La Rochelle in Nostradamus time when the whole city was Huguenot, they could say nothing good about Catholicism or or that. So it rhymes,
Mhm.
and vice versa in Paris, which was Catholic.
All right, so audience, please make sure you click that link. Go to John's website, get those periodicals, and sign up for a reading. So, yep, click, click, click. But thank you everybody for participating in the chat and asking your questions. We greatly appreciate it. Remember, we do this approximately every 2 weeks. Please make sure that you join our next show and ask questions. You can ask
Yes.
questions through typing them in the chat, and you can just ask for the mic in X spaces, and you can ask live. So there's different modalities that you can use to ask questions. So thank you for joining, everybody. We're going to sign off. So John, if you can say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye to everybody.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we will see you in about 2 weeks.